The docking clamps shrieked as the Zarkadi warship latched onto the human research station. Alarms blared through Corridor 7 where Connor Hayes pressed himself against a bulkhead, pulse rifle trembling in his sweating hands. He wasn't military. He was a botanist. 3 weeks ago, he'd been cataloging moss samples in the hydroponics bay. Now he was the last human left alive on Outpost Kepler. The airlock exploded inward with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Connor's finger hovered over the trigger as armored figures poured through the breach. But these weren't soldiers. They were too elegant, too deliberate. The lead figure stood 7 feet tall, her exoskeleton gleaming like polished obsidian. Golden neural filaments cascaded from her elongated skull like a living crown. Queen Veshhara of the 7th Fleet had come personally. Connor had read the intelligence reports. The Zarkathi matriarchy had crushed 17 species in their expansion across the Orion Arm. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They simply conquered and moved on. Human. Her voice resonated through his skull without passing through air. Telepathy. You will lower your weapon. Connor's hands shook harder. Every instinct screamed at him to fire, to go down fighting like the others had. But something in her tone wasn't cruel. It was curious. No, he managed to croak out. The Queen's entourage shifted, weapons powering up, but Veshhara raised one taloned hand and they froze. You refuse a direct command from a Dominion Queen? You killed my friends, Connor said. His voice cracked but held. You destroyed our defenses. You're here to finish the job. So yeah, I refuse. Silence stretched between them. The Queen's crystalline eyes studied him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. She took one step forward, then another. Her guards tensed but didn't follow. Your species interests me, she said. 30 cycles we have monitored your expansion. You are weak. Your technology primitive. Your lifespan's brief. Yet you persist in the most hostile regions of space with a determination that defies logic. Connor kept the rifle aimed at her chest. Is this the part where you tell me resistance is futile? This is the part where I offer you a choice. Veshhara stood directly before him now, so close he could see the bioluminescent patterns shifting beneath her carapace. Join my fleet as a cultural liaison. Help me understand your kind. Or die here with your moss samples and your misplaced courage. Some choice. It is more than I have offered anyone in 300 years. Connor's mind raced. This had to be a trick, but the way she looked at him, tilted her head with that strange fascination, it felt disturbingly genuine. Why me? He asked. The Queen's mandibles curved into something that might have been a smile. Because you are still pointing that weapon at my face, little human. And I find that utterly captivating. Connor's rifle clattered to the deck plating. His arms had simply given out, adrenaline finally burning through his system like acid. He expected Veshhara's guards to surge forward, to clap him in restraints or worse. Instead, the Queen gestured and they retreated to the shattered airlock. Wise decision, she said. I didn't decide anything, Connor gasped. My muscles failed. That mandible smile widened. Honesty, another captivating trait. She turned and glided back toward her ship with fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Connor's legs moved before his brain caught up, following her through the breach. The Zarkadi warship's interior was all organic curves and pulsing bioluminescence. The walls themselves seemed alive, breathing with a rhythmic hum that vibrated through his boots. You will have quarters adjacent to my command, Sanctum, Veshhara announced as they moved through corridors lined with her crew. Every Zarkathi they passed stopped to stare, their neural filaments flaring in what Connor desperately hoped wasn't aggression. You will attend my strategic sessions. You will explain human behavior when I require context. I'm a botanist, not a diplomat, Connor protested. You are what I say you are. They entered a massive chamber dominated by a throne of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. Holographic displays showed star maps and fleet positions across dozens of systems. Veshhara settled onto her throne with the confidence of someone who'd commanded armies before Connor was born. Tell me, Connor Hayes, she said, and the fact that she knew his name sent ice down his spine. Why did your species establish that outpost in a region we claimed 50 cycles ago? We didn't know it was claimed, he answered carefully. We thought it was unclaimed space. You thought wrong, clearly. Her eyes narrowed. You are being flippant with a Dominion queen. I'm being traumatized, Connor shot back, surprise overriding his fear. You killed 16 people I worked with for 3 years. You're holding me prisoner on an alien warship. Forgive me if my diplomatic skills aren't perfect right now. Silence crashed through the command sanctum like a physical force. Every Zarkothi in the room had frozen, their attention locked on Connor with predatory focus. He realized he might have just made a fatal mistake. Then Veshara laughed. It was a strange sound, resonating through both air and telepathy simultaneously, musical and harsh all at once. You challenge me even now, she said with obvious delight. Your people truly do not understand what they face, do they? Apparently not. She rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him. Connor forced himself to hold his ground even as every instinct screamed to run. Veshara circled him slowly, studying him from every angle. I have conquered 17 species, she said softly. Each one begged. Each one offered tribute, alliances, anything to avoid annihilation. Not one ever spoke to me as an equal. She stopped directly in front of him. You do not even realize you are doing it. Doing what? Treating me as simply another person rather than a force of nature to be feared. Connor swallowed hard. Should I be more afraid? Most would say yes. Her head tilted again in that unsettling way. I find myself uncertain what I should say. A communication chime echoed through the chamber. One of Veshara's officers approached with cautious steps. My queen, the human fleet has mobilized. 3 battle groups are en route to this sector. They demand your immediate withdrawal and the return of survivor Connor Hayes. Connor's heart lurched. They knew he was alive. They were coming for him. Veshara's neural filaments flared brilliant gold. Inform the human fleet that Connor Hayes is under my personal protection. Any aggressive action will be met with total annihilation of their forces. Wait, Connor said. You can't just start a war over you? The Queen interrupted. I can do whatever I wish, little human. I am Veshara of the 7th Fleet. I have burned worlds for far less interesting reasons. She turned back to her officer. Open a direct channel to their fleet commander. I will negotiate personally. The holographic displays shifted to show a stern-faced woman in a human naval uniform. Admiral Kate Morrison. Connor recognized her from the briefings. She commanded the Terran Defense Coalition's entire Outer Rim operations. This is Admiral Morrison of the TDC Valiant. Her voice crackled with barely controlled fury. You have 10 minutes to return our citizen before we open fire. Veshara's smile could have cut steel. How delightful. The humans wish to dance. Admiral Morrison, Veshara said with dangerous sweetness. I am Queen, Veshara of the Zarkothi Dominion. Your citizen remains aboard my vessel by mutual agreement. Mutual agreement? Morrison's face went red. You destroyed a civilian research station and kidnapped a non-combatant. There's nothing mutual about that. Connor stepped forward before he could stop himself. Admiral, I'm okay, but she hasn't heard me. Morrison's expression flickered between relief and confusion. Hayes, what the hell is going on over there? That is an excellent question, Veshara murmured, her eyes fixed on Connor with unsettling intensity. One I am still exploring myself. The Queen's command staff exchanged glances, their neural filaments pulsing in rapid sequences Connor couldn't decipher. He got the distinct impression they were having entire conversations he couldn't hear. My Queen, one of the officers spoke aloud, probably for Connor's benefit. The human fleet is powering weapons. They are preparing to engage. Morrison's voice cut through the tension. You have 5 minutes, Veshara. Return Hayes or face the consequences. Consequences, the Queen repeated, as if tasting the word. How refreshingly bold. I propose an alternative. A challenge, if your species has the courage for such things. Connor's stomach dropped. This couldn't be good. What kind of challenge? Morrison demanded. Single combat. Your champion against mine. If your warrior prevails, Connor Hayes returns to you and my fleet withdraws from this sector. If my champion wins, he remains with me, and you retreat immediately. Absolutely not, Morrison snapped. We don't settle disputes with gladiatorial combat like primitives. Veshara's laugh echoed through the chamber, and yet you were prepared to sacrifice thousands of crew members in a fleet engagement instead. How civilized. Connor watched Morrison's jaw clench. The Admiral wasn't wrong to refuse, but the Queen had backed her into a rhetorical corner. There has to be another way, Connor said quietly. There does not, Veshara replied without looking at him. This is how disputes are settled in Dominion space. Your Admiral can accept my challenge, or she can watch her fleet burn. Those are her options. You're insane, Connor breathed. I am practical. Now she did turn to him. War is costly. Battle damages ships, kills valuable crew members, wastes resources. Single combat determines outcomes with minimal loss. It is the most logical approach. It's barbaric. It is efficient. Morrison's voice interrupted them. Who would be your champion, Veshara? The Queen's smile returned, sharp and predatory. Connor Hayes, of course. The command sanctum erupted. Veshara's officers began speaking over each other in rapid telepathic bursts that made the air shimmer. Morrison was shouting something about war crimes and treaty violations. Connor just stood there, brain completely offline. You want me to fight? He finally managed. I want you to survive, Veshara said calmly, silencing her staff with a gesture. Which you will do because I will ensure it. I'm a botanist. I've never fought anyone in my life. Precisely. Why you are perfect. She turned back to Morrison's hologram. Do you accept, Admiral? Or shall we proceed to mutual destruction instead? Morrison looked like she wanted to reach through the display and strangle someone. This is against every regulation, every protocol, Your answer, Admiral. My patience has limits. A long silence stretched between the two ships. Connor could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. This was madness, complete insanity. He couldn't fight a trained Zarkati warrior. He'd be killed in seconds. Who would I fight? Connor asked Veshara quietly. My second-in-command, war leader Kresh. He is skilled but honorable. He will not kill you unnecessarily. How reassuring. I give you my word, little human. You will survive this encounter. Something in her tone made Connor look up. Veshara was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Was that concern? From a conqueror who destroyed 17 civilizations? Fine, Morrison's voice cut through. We accept your challenge. But Hayes gets to choose the terms of combat. Veshara's neural filaments flared brighter. Connor Hayes, name your conditions. Every eye in the command sanctum fixed on him. Human and Zarkati alike waited for his response. Connor's mind raced through possibilities, discarding each one as quickly as it formed. Then an idea struck him. Utterly ridiculous. Completely absurd. But maybe just crazy enough to work. Botany, he said. Veshara blinked. I do not understand. The challenge isn't combat. It's botany. We each get identical seeds, soil, and equipment. Whoever grows the healthiest plant in 24 hours wins. Dead silence filled the chamber. Then Veshara threw her head back and laughed so hard her entire body shook. You propose to settle an interstellar dispute with gardening, Veshara said, still shaking with laughter. This is why I find your species so endlessly fascinating. Is that a no? Connor asked. The Queen's amusement faded into something more calculating. War leader Kresh, step forward. A massive Zarkati emerged from the shadows at the back of the sanctum. He stood even taller than Veshara, his carapace scarred from countless battles. Neural filaments the color of dried blood framed a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. My queen. His mental voice rumbled like distant thunder. The human has proposed a contest of botanical skill rather than martial prowess. Do you accept these terms? Kresh studied Connor with eyes that had seen more death than Connor could imagine. I accept. I will crush him in any arena he chooses. Excellent, Veshara purred. Admiral Morrison, Do these terms satisfy you? Morrison looked like she'd swallowed something sour. If Hayes agrees, then yes. I agree, Connor said quickly, before his survival instincts could override his mouth. Then we have terms, Veshara declared. The contest will take place in my auxiliary biolab. Both participants will have access to identical resources. Neutral observers from both sides will monitor for interference. The challenge begins in 1 standard hour. The holographic connection terminated. Morrison's image flickered out, leaving Connor alone with an entire warship full of aliens who'd been trying to kill him an hour ago. Kresh approached with heavy footsteps that echoed through the chamber. You have made a grave error, human. I may not know your weak plants, but I learn quickly. I will study. I will adapt. I will defeat you. Probably, Connor admitted. But at least nobody dies this way. Something flickered across Kresh's scarred face. Respect, maybe. Or possibly just confusion at human stupidity. Come, Veshara said, placing a taloned hand on Connor's shoulder. The touch was surprisingly gentle. I will show you to the biolab. You should familiarize yourself with the equipment before the contest begins. She guided him through winding corridors while her staff scrambled to prepare. Connor's legs felt like water, but he forced himself to keep walking. Why did you really propose this challenge? He asked quietly. I told you. Single combat is efficient. You could have just let me go. Avoided this whole mess. Veshara stopped walking. They stood in an empty corridor. Bioluminescent patterns casting strange shadows across her features. I could have, she agreed. But then I would not have this opportunity. Opportunity for what? To understand you better. Her head tilted in that now familiar gesture. 300 years I have commanded fleets. 300 years of conquest and expansion. It has been efficient, effective, and utterly predictable. Her eyes locked onto his. Then you point a rifle at my face with shaking hands and refuse my direct command. You speak to me as an equal despite having no power whatsoever. You propose settling disputes through plant cultivation, and this interests you because I cannot predict what you will do next. Connor Hayes. Do you have any idea how rare that is for someone like me? Before Connor could respond, they arrived at the biolab. It was massive. Easily twice the size of the entire hydroponics bay back on Outpost Kepler. Rows of cultivation stations lined the walls, each one equipped with hydroponic systems, soil beds, and environmental controls that looked far more advanced than anything human science had produced. This is incredible, Connor breathed, momentarily forgetting his situation. We Zarkadi have cultivated bioluminescent flora for millennia, Veshara explained. Our ships are partially alive, grown as much as built. Botanical knowledge is essential to our culture. Connor's confidence evaporated. Wait, Kresh actually knows about plants? Of course. All Zarkadi learn basic cultivation. It is part of our education. She paused. Did you not know this? How would I know this? Your species doesn't exactly share cultural information with the civilizations you're conquering. Veshara's mandibles curved into that sharp smile. An excellent point. Perhaps this contest will be more interesting than I anticipated. Technicians began arriving, setting up 2 identical workstations. Human observers beamed over from the fleet, looking distinctly uncomfortable surrounded by Zarkothi warriors. Admiral Morrison herself materialized in the corner as a holographic presence, arms crossed and expression thunderous. Hayes, she said without preamble, what the hell were you thinking? Honestly, Admiral, I was thinking that anything beats watching 2 fleets blow each other to pieces. Noble sentiment. Terrible strategy. I'm a botanist, not a strategist. Clearly. Kresh entered the biolab with several attendants carrying equipment. He'd changed into what looked like a ceremonial robe, deep purple with silver threading that matched his neural filaments. He settled at his workstation, with the calm focus of a master preparing for meditation. Connor took his position at the opposite station. His hands were shaking again. Veshara moved to the center of the room, commanding attention without effort. The terms are simple. Each participant will receive identical seeds of the Terran species, Rosa rubiginosa. Identical soil composition, identical environmental parameters. You have 24 standard hours to cultivate the healthiest specimen. Growth, color, structural integrity, and overall vitality will determine the victor. She produced 2 small packets, holding them up for all observers to verify they were identical. Then she placed one in front of Crash and one in front of Connor. You may begin on my signal. She raised one taloned hand. Connor's mind raced through everything he knew about wild roses, germination strategies, optimal soil pH, water requirements, light exposure. Vishara's hand dropped. Begin. Connor tore open his seed packet with trembling fingers. 3 small seeds tumbled into his palm, each one a tiny knot of potential. Beside him, Kresh moved with methodical precision, examining his seeds under a magnification field before setting them carefully on his workstation. Think, Connor told himself. Roses need stratification, cold treatment to break dormancy. But 24 hours meant no time for traditional methods. He'd have to force germination using every trick he'd learned in 3 years of coaxing plants to grow in hostile environments. He grabbed a sterile blade and carefully scarified each seed, scratching the hard outer coating to allow moisture penetration. Across the room, Kresh was doing something similar, but with a tool that looked like it used focused sound waves. Oh, showing off, Connor thought bitterly. Soil composition next. Connor mixed his growing medium with practiced efficiency, adding perlite for drainage, a touch of mycorrhizal fungi to boost root development, adjusting the pH to slightly acidic. His hands steadied as muscle memory took over. This he knew. This he could do. Crush was consulting a holographic display, information streaming past his eyes faster than Connor could track. Learning, adapting. Exactly like he'd promised. Nervous little human? Veshara's voice whispered directly into Connor's mind. He jumped, nearly spilling his soil mixture. The Queen stood behind him, watching over his shoulder with intense focus. Thought you were supposed to be neutral, Connor muttered. I am observing both participants equally. But her attention never wavered from Connor's hands. You work with confidence now. Different from the terrified creature who pointed a rifle at me. Plants don't shoot back. Perhaps that is why you prefer them to people. Connor planted his scarified seeds at optimal depth, 3 containers arranged in a precise triangle. He activated the environmental controls, setting temperature to 2017 2 degrees Celsius, humidity at 65%, full spectrum lighting at medium intensity. Then came the risky part. He pulled up the advanced options on the control panel, accessing settings he'd only read about in theoretical papers. Growth hormones, gibberellic acid to trigger germination, a carefully calculated dose of auxins to promote root development. Too much would kill the seeds, too little would waste precious time. His finger hovered over the activation key. You hesitate, Veshar observed. I'm about to either jumpstart germination or poison my seeds. Little bit of pressure. And if you fail, then your war leader wins, and I stay your prisoner. Would that truly be so terrible? Connor looked up at her, genuinely confused by the question. Vishar's expression was unreadable, those crystalline eyes reflecting the biolab's soft lighting. You killed my friends, he said quietly. I know. No apology in her tone. No regret. I have killed many beings across many worlds. It is what conquerors do. Doesn't that bother you? Should it? Before Connor could answer, Kresh spoke aloud from his workstation. The human lacks focus. He allows emotion to cloud his judgment. This is why his species will lose. Admiral Morrison's hologram flickered with anger. Stay focused, Hayes. Don't let him get in your head. Connor turned back to his controls and pressed the activation key. Pale green mist flooded his growing chambers, bathing the planted seeds in precisely calibrated hormones. No going back now. Across the lab, Kresh had already finished his planting. His chambers hummed with Zarkadi technology, bioluminescent patterns swirling through the soil itself. He stood back with arms crossed, the picture of confidence. Phase 1 complete, he announced. Now we wait to see whose seeds germinate first. Hours crawled past. Connor monitored his chambers obsessively. adjusting humidity fractions of a percentage point, fine-tuning light wavelengths, checking soil temperature every 10 minutes. The human observers rotated shifts, bringing him food he barely touched and coffee he drained mechanically. Veshara never left. She remained in the biolab through the entire process, watching both participants, but always returning her attention to Connor. It should have been unnerving. Somehow it was almost comforting. "Why do you care so much about plant cultivation?" she asked during hour 6, when Connor was red-eyed and swaying with exhaustion. "Plants are honest," he said, words slurring slightly. "You give them what they need, they grow. You neglect them, they die. No politics. No games. No lying. You think I lie? I think you're playing some kind of game I don't understand." Vishara's mandibles curved, very perceptive for someone running on no sleep. "I've pulled longer shifts than this in hydroponics. I once kept an entire crop alive through a reactor failure that lasted 36 hours. Tell me about it." So Connor did, grateful for the distraction. He described the desperate scramble to rig emergency lighting, the careful rationing of backup power, the joy of seeing those first green shoots survive against impossible odds. Veshara listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed genuine interest. Down. Hour 12 brought the first results. Kresh's chambers showed activity. Tiny green shoots breaking through the soil surface, already reaching for the light. He'd gotten germination in half the time Connor expected. "First sprouts," Kresh announced with obvious satisfaction. "The human falls behind." Admiral Morrison's hologram leaned forward. "Hayes?" Connor checked his own chambers. "Nothing yet." His heart sank. Then he looked closer. There, barely visible, soil disturbed in one container. Not a sprout yet, but movement underneath. Something happening below the surface that Kresh's faster germination had bypassed. Root development. Connor's approach had prioritized root structure over rapid top growth. His seeds were building foundation before reaching for light. Slower to start, but potentially stronger overall. "Patience, Admiral," Connor said with more confidence than he felt. "We're playing the long game." Veshara leaned close to his ear. "Bold strategy, little human. I hope you know what you're doing. That makes 2 of us." Hour 18 and Kresh's plants stood 3 inches tall, vibrant green stems reaching proudly toward the artificial sun. The Zarkathi war leader crossed his arms in satisfaction while his attendants murmured approval through telepathic channels that made the air shimmer. Connor's containers showed 2 modest sprouts barely an inch high, pale and fragile looking by comparison. "This contest is over," Kresh declared. "My specimens demonstrate superior growth in every measurable parameter." Admiral Morrison's hologram flickered with barely contained frustration. "Hayes, tell me you have a plan. Trust the roots," Connor whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He adjusted his nutrient mix, adding a carefully measured dose of phosphorus to encourage what was happening beneath the soil. His readouts showed extensive root development, white tendrils spreading through the growing medium like neural networks. Kresh's plants had roots too, but shallower, focused on supporting rapid vertical growth. Different strategies, different outcomes. Veshara circled both workstations, examining each plant with the intensity of a general studying battlefield positions. Her neural filaments pulsed in complex patterns Connor had learned meant deep concentration. "War leader Kresh employs the standard Zarkadi approach," she observed. "Maximum efficiency, rapid deployment, overwhelming force. Textbook perfect." "And mine?" Connor asked. "Chaotic, unconventional, built on foundation rather than display." Her eyes met his. "I cannot predict which will prove superior." Hour 20 brought the first sign Connor's gamble might pay off. His plants began accelerating their vertical growth, but unlike Kresh's specimens, they showed thick stems and deep green coloring that indicated robust cellular structure. The roots he'd prioritized were now feeding explosive development above ground. Kresh noticed. His confident posture shifted slightly, weight redistributing as he studied Connor's chambers with new attention. "Interesting," the war leader admitted. "The human delayed gratification for structural integrity, inefficient but creative. Sometimes slow is fast." Connor said, channeling every mentor who'd ever taught him patience in the hydroponics labs. He made another adjustment, reducing nitrogen slightly to prevent his plants from growing too quickly and developing weak stems. Every parameter had to balance perfectly. One wrong move and everything could collapse. Veshara moved closer to Connor's station, close enough that he could feel heat radiating from her exoskeleton. "You are enjoying this," she said quietly. "I'm terrified." You smile while terrified. Another fascinating contradiction. Connor realized she was right. Despite everything, despite the impossible pressure and the fleet standoff, and his entire future hanging on 3 rose seedlings, some part of him was alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. This was pure problem solving, just him and plants, and the fundamental challenge of making things grow. "I miss this," he admitted. "Before the war, before the fear, I just grew things, made gardens in impossible places. That's all I ever wanted to do. And now you do it with civilizations watching. No pressure or anything." Hour 22 and the plants were nearly equal height, but the difference in quality was becoming obvious. Kresh's specimens had grown tall but showed slight yellowing in the lower leaves, early signs of nutrient stress from their rapid development. Connor's plants stood thick and healthy, every leaf dark green and vigorous. The war leader was making adjustments now, trying to compensate, but the damage was done. His early advantage had become a liability. "You are losing," Veshara told Kresh directly. "The contest is not finished," he replied, but doubt crept into his mental voice. Admiral Morrison's hologram showed cautious optimism. "Hayes, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it." Connor checked his environmental sensors one more time. Everything optimal. His plants were entering their final growth phase with perfect conditions and strong foundations. All he could do now was watch and wait. Veshara placed her hand on his shoulder again, that same gentle touch that seemed so incongruous from a being who commanded fleets. "When you win," she said softly, "will you choose to leave?" The question hit Connor like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on the contest itself that he hadn't thought about what came after. If he won, Admiral Morrison would take him back to human space, back to safety, back to normal, back to being alone in a hydroponics bay, cataloging moss samples while the universe moved on without him. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "That is not an answer your admiral will appreciate. Probably not." Kresh suddenly slammed his hand against his workstation. "Enough waiting. We measure now. Let neutral parties judge the victor before the deadline expires." "Agreed," Morrison said immediately. Veshara gestured, and technicians swarmed forward with scanning equipment. They measured stem thickness, leaf surface area, root depth, chlorophyll density, cellular structure, and a dozen other parameters Connor had never even considered. Numbers streamed across holographic displays while both sides watched in tense silence. The head technician, a smaller Sarkati with silver neural filaments, compiled the results and presented them to Veshara. The Queen studied the data for what felt like an eternity. Then she smiled. "The victor," she announced, "is Connor Hayes of Earth. His specimens demonstrate superior health in all critical measurements." Kresh bowed his head in acknowledgement. "The human fought well. I accept defeat with honor." Admiral Morrison's hologram showed visible relief. "Excellent work, Hayes. Prepare for immediate transport back to the fleet." But Connor wasn't looking at Morrison. He was watching Veshara, whose expression had shifted into something he couldn't quite read. Disappointment? Acceptance? Something else entirely? "The terms of our agreement are clear," the Queen said formally. "Connor Hayes will be returned to human custody. My fleet will withdraw from this sector." She paused. "Unless the human wishes to renegotiate." Every eye in the biolab locked onto Connor. "What are you saying?" Morrison demanded. Veshara ignored her, attention focused entirely on Connor. "You won your freedom fairly, but I make you a different offer now. Stay aboard my ship voluntarily. Help me understand your species. Show me how humans think, how they solve problems, how they see the universe." "Absolutely not," Morrison snapped. "Hayes, that's an order. You're coming home, and what awaits me at home, Admiral?" Connor asked quietly. Another research station? Another empty lab? Counting samples while pretending I matter. You matter here. You just prevented a war. I prevented one battle. The war will come eventually. He looked at Veshara. Won't it? Inevitably. The Queen agreed. Our species are too different. Too proud. Conflict is unavoidable, unless someone builds a bridge, Connor said. Morrison's hologram flared brighter with anger. Hayes, think about what you're saying. She destroyed your station. Killed your colleagues. You can't seriously be considering this. I'm not forgetting what happened, Admiral. But I'm also not forgetting that she offered me a choice when she could have just taken what she wanted. That she agreed to settle this without more bloodshed. That she kept her word. Her word means nothing. She's a conqueror. And we're what exactly? Connor shot back. Peaceful explorers who accidentally set up a military listening post in claimed territory? We're not innocent here either. Veshara remained silent, watching the exchange with fascination. Her neural filaments pulsed in slow, measured rhythms. If I go back now, someone else takes my place eventually. Connor continued. Another liaison, another incident, another excuse for war. But if I stay, if I actually try to build understanding between our species, maybe we buy time. Maybe we find another way. Or maybe you become a hostage she uses against us, Morrison countered. Then you know where to find me. Connor turned to face Veshara directly. But I need your word on something. The Queen tilted her head. Name your terms, little human. No more attacks on human civilian installations. Your fleet can hold this sector, but you don't expand into our territory. And you let me communicate with my people regularly. No isolation. No cutting me off from home. You negotiate from a position of weakness, Kresh observed, though his tone held respect. I negotiate from a position of being the only human willing to try this, Connor replied. That's worth something. Veshara studied him for a long moment. Then she extended one taloned hand. I accept your terms. You will serve as cultural liaison between our peoples. You will have freedom of movement aboard my vessels and access to communication with human space. In return, you will help me understand your species and prevent unnecessary conflict. Connor took her hand. The scales were warm against his skin, surprisingly delicate despite their armored appearance. Hayes, don't do this, Morrison pleaded. We can find another way. No, Admiral, we can't. Because nobody else is crazy enough to try. He managed a tired smile. Besides, someone needs to teach these people about proper hydroponics. Have you seen their growing techniques? Completely inefficient. Kesh made a sound that might have been a laugh. Veshara's mandibles curved into that sharp smile Connor was beginning to recognize as genuine amusement. Then it is settled. Admiral Morrison, you may inform your superiors that a human representative now resides aboard my flagship. All future diplomatic communications should be directed through Connor Hayes. Morrison looked like she wanted to argue further, but military discipline won out. This is irregular, unprecedented, and probably insane. But if Hayes is volunteering, I can't stop him. Her expression softened slightly. Stay safe, and for God's sake check in regularly so we know you're alive. Yes, ma'am. The hologram flickered out, leaving Connor alone with an entire warship full of aliens, and a decision he still wasn't sure was brilliant or suicidal. You surprise me again, Veshara said quietly. I expected you to choose safety. I did choose safety, just not mine. If this works, if we can actually prevent a war, millions of people on both sides stay safe. And if it fails, then I die knowing I tried something that mattered. She placed both hands on his shoulders, looking down at him with those crystalline eyes that seemed to see straight through him. 300 years I have commanded fleets, Connor Hayes. 300 years of beings who feared me, obeyed me, served me. Not once has anyone chosen to stay by my side for reasons other than duty or terror. Maybe that's because you never asked. Perhaps. Her grip tightened slightly. I will not be easy to work with. I am demanding, intolerant of failure, accustomed to absolute authority. You will challenge me, and I will not always appreciate it. Sounds perfect. I'm stubborn, terrible at following orders, and I talk to plants more than people. We're both disasters. Kresh stepped forward, placing a massive fist over his chest in what Connor guessed was a salute. The human has earned my respect. I will personally ensure his safety aboard this vessel. Other Zarkadi in the biolab began mimicking the gesture, one by one, until the entire room stood in formal acknowledgement. Connor felt his throat tighten. An hour ago, these same beings had been ready to kill him. "Come," Veshara said, guiding him toward the exit. "You should rest. Tomorrow we begin the real work of understanding one another. It will be far more difficult than growing roses. I look forward to it." They walked through the corridors of the living ship, bioluminescence pulsing around them like a heartbeat. Connor had no idea what came next, no map for the territory he'd just entered, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. "Veshara?" he said as they reached his quarters. "Yes? Thank you for not killing me back on the station." Her laugh echoed through the corridor, musical and strange and somehow right. "Thank you for pointing that rifle at me, Connor Hayes. I suspect our peoples will tell this story for generations. The proud alien queen and the terrified botanist. The conqueror who found something she could not predict, and the human brave enough to stay." She touched his face gently with one talon. "Sleep well, little human. Tomorrow we change the galaxy." She left him there, standing in the doorway of his new quarters aboard an alien warship, alive against all odds and chosen for reasons he still didn't fully understand. Connor looked at his hands, still trembling slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline, and the weight of what he'd just committed to. Then he smiled. Somewhere in human space, his former colleagues were probably calling him insane. Aboard this ship, the Zarkadi were likely questioning their queen's judgment. Both sides thought this arrangement was impossible. Good, Connor thought. Impossible was